I can go on and on about Professor David, and there is a lot to discuss what comes from his basket. But again, I'll be giving the stage to him to share his journey with us. And on that note, please, pleasure to meet you and welcome to SMB Connect Spotlight Series, David.
Thank you, Pooja. It's really nice to be here, and anything I can do for the SMB community in India, I'm happy to be part.
Well, there's a lot I can voice about you, but I would like to hear it all from you. You have worn a remarkable number of hats from international trader, marketing director, product manager, technology planner, strategy consultant at For American Express and AT&T, and now the Chief Innovation Officer at 10xgrowth.com. When you look back at that arc, when you look back at the journey, was there a thread running through all of it, or it felt like a series of unplanned turns? How was the journey?
Well, there wasn't always a plan, but about 10, 12 years into my career, I finally decided what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so ever since then, and that's been now about 40 years, I've been the same path. And I think if you want to look for a commonality in that arc, it's problem solving.
Right.
It's looking at challenges that are faced by businesses and looking for solutions that are going to get them to their goals. So that I think is the common thread behind the many hats that I've worn in my career.
Great. You earned an MBA in International Management from Thunderbird School of Global Management, which is one of the most globally focused business schools. How did that shape the way you think about strategy and innovation differently from someone who went to a more conventional program?
Well, I think we have to be careful not to put the cart before the horse. I don't think it was Thunderbird that shaped my way of thinking and my business approach as much as it was my goals. As I said, I figured out what I wanted to do when I grew up,
Right.
and my approach that shaped my choice to study at Thunderbird. Thunderbird was at the time the number one business school in the world for global management, and
Right.
it is still number one in many rankings. So my goal was not just to solve problems, but it was to solve problems internationally. And so that's why I chose Thunderbird. But it was a lovely experience. As I told you, I was into my career some years before I decided to pursue higher education. So by the
Right.
time I reached Thunderbird, I actually could have taught some of the courses that I had to attend, but it was
Okay.
still a great experience. And for anybody who's thinking of higher education, the biggest thing I got out of Thunderbird was not the courses. The biggest thing was the network. So
Right.
that's something to keep in mind when whatever you're working on your network. Somebody said many times, a saying has been said, your network is your net worth.
Network. Absolutely agree to that.
Mhm.
Talking about network, we have seen the waters and beaches of almost every country, right? You move from consulting in Connecticut to for the likes of Pitney Bowes, Fortune 500 clients, and business intelligence firms to building your career in New Delhi and now in Mumbai. What drove that move? What drove that journey across the globe? And what surprised you most when you arrived in India?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, I knew that my goal was to work globally. And
Right.
that's why I got the MBA in international management. So that's what brought me to India. I mean, um, it's an interesting evolution. Um, I went to work at Pitney Bowes. It was my last corporate job in America. And I started as an internal consultant, but then shifted over to the innovation lab. And what I learned in the innovation lab was really the key to making that final step to launching me outside of my native country, which is US, and launching me into the international arena. Because my prior expertise was in things like marketing, competitive intelligence, and strategy. So the problem with those fields is they're very ethnocentric. They work in
Right.
one culture. What works in marketing in US probably won't work as well in India. So I
Right.
couldn't do those things internationally. When I worked in the innovation lab in Pitney Bowes, I learned a structured approach to innovation, and that works in every country. So using that Thunderbird network, which is over 40,000 alumni in over 140 countries, I got introductions into South America, Western Europe, and India. And India is where I got the customers. So that's why I'm in India, but I'm really happy. Now let's look at the other question you asked, Pooja. You said, what surprised me about India?
Right.
I thought I was really well prepared to live abroad. In
Right.
both my undergraduate course and my PG MBA course, I did a
Right.
lot of work on intercultural communication. I understood cultural differences and the things that drive them, but nothing prepared me for India. India was the most confusing, challenging place I'd ever visited because everything looked the same as what I was used to, but nothing looked the same. Now, some people get really frustrated and give up. I took it as a wonderful challenge. I fell in love with India. So even though I was uncomfortable having to adjust the way I dealt with things like time,
Right.
space,
Right.
social relationships, all these things were new and different to me, even the way business gets done. It was a great experience. And I've been, as of this recording, I've been in this country living here full time for 18 years. And I'd hope to spend the rest of my life here. I love my India.
Wow, wow, great. Loved your approach. And now I'm very much interested to know this. In the beginning, this might have been a roller coaster ride for you to understand the way Indians look at marketing and other aspects of business. Did you see any sort of translation gap or something that was there persistent in the across Indian businesses? Was there something you
Um,
found different?
well, of course, there are differences. Every culture is unique.
Right.
And it's important to state that when you're comparing cultures, you never reach a value judgment. You never say one is better, one is worse, one is
Right.
good, one is bad. They're just different. So some of the differences, as I explained, one of the biggest differences I had to deal with was this thing called high context versus low context communication. If any
Right.
of the listeners are dealing with people in Northern Europe or North America, they will quickly come to understand that communication there depends on the words. I have a little mantra with apologies to Airtel that I used to give to my students in MBA. Har ek shabd zaruri hota hai,
Yes,
which
right.
means every word is important. Okay. In a low context communication society, all of the message is in the words. The words are given literal definitions. You can find out what a word means by looking in the dictionary. Now, when I came to India, I discovered quickly that this is not a low context communication culture. This is
Right.
a high context communication culture, which means the words really are not that important. Other things are much more important. The situation, the social standing of the people who are communicating, the customs and habits, the clothing, the gestures, whatever the situation calls for, what other people are doing. Indians, we tend to get our messages from these things, not from the words. So that led to a lot of miscommunication because people would say things. I would process them literally, but I didn't know that they weren't meant to be taken literally. And by the same token, I would say things that were literal and people would be shocked or sometimes offended because
Right.
in a high context culture, you're not supposed to speak bluntly and directly.
Right.
You may offend someone. And I didn't have that filter. I came from America where you say blunt and even rude things and people accept it. Here, I'm happy to say Indians are much more polite, but that was a hard adjustment for me.
Yes, absolutely. Since you mentioned about teaching your students, let's talk about that stint. You spent nearly a decade as professor of entrepreneurship innovation at Atlas 𝐃𝐚𝐯𝐢𝐝 University in Mumbai. What's the difference between teaching innovation to a 22-year-old student versus training a seasoned corporate manager? Where's the difference lie?
Well, there's an advantage and there's a disadvantage. The advantage is the student does not come to innovation with a whole lot of settled ideas. She doesn't
Right,
have a clear idea based on her past experience. So she's more open to being taught, to learning the methods and the processes and the tools that produce really fantastic innovation. The downside is that as a fresher or as a person with no work experience, she has no context. And I suppose there's one other cultural difference that makes it a little bit harder. As you know from my background, I have not only worked with companies and businesses, but I've spent a lot of the past 10 years working in education. And that's
right,
another area where the country I was raised in and the country I have adopted, India, are considerably different. Traditionally, and I think the generation where most of these listeners would have grown up in, education was A, based on memorization, and
right,
B, it was only focused on one goal, getting enough grades to get a good placement.
right,
And
right.
so you have this whole time that Indian students used to spend in their university not even caring, I'm sad to say, about learning, just
Right,
clearing exams and getting placed.
right,
So the disadvantage is the young person sees no advantage to actually learning how to innovate and can't really doesn't have any desire to master the techniques and practice them, just wants to write an exam and get marks. Now, at Atlas Skill Tech, it's one of the top universities in the country, and it was founded by Dr. Indu Shahani with the goal of creating not so many job seekers, but creating more job creators. So I'm happy to say that at our university where I taught, we fostered a lot of entrepreneurship and our students were fairly open to innovation. That's not yet true everywhere, but India is moving in that direction. Now let's go to the other side. You asked about the corporate executives. They definitely see the need for innovation. They know that innovation will make a difference in their company's bottom line. The problem is they already have ideas on how innovation needs to be done. And sometimes it's very hard to unlearn what they're
right.
already doing. So there you have the differences between the young people and the corporate executives.
Right. We are talking about the corporate world. So Indian MSMEs and SMEs, they are very particular about how they are taking care of businesses, and also sometimes what happens is that Indian businesses, when I'm talking about, especially the SMEs, they're known for their jugaad approach, if you have heard the word, to problem solving. How do you reconcile that with structured innovation methodology? And do this complement each other, or is there some sort of contrast?
Okay, well, definitely there's a contrast, and you're right. India is world famous for jugaad.
Right,
It's one of our great strengths. But the simple fact of the matter is, jugaad does not produce level, the same level of excellent, profitable results compared to structured innovation.
right,
The man who's probably most responsible for me being in India is Dr. R.A. Mashelkar, who was the national head of the chemical lab in Pune and then the Congress on Scientific and Industrial Research. Amazing man. And he works with Dr. Gupta at IIM Ahmedabad and the National Innovation Foundation and the Honeybee Foundation. But he is very much opposed to jugaad innovation, precisely because it doesn't get us to where we need to be. Personally, I love jugaad innovation, but I think that structured is better. Now, you asked about the SMB community, small and
Right.
medium businesses.
Right.
What happens is every small business, every business of any size begins with an innovation. It wasn't there before. Somebody had to invent it, even if it's just opening a storefront in the market in your village. The problem is often that's the last innovation. So founders come with a great idea, an innovative solution, and I wish them all success. But they can get stuck with only their initial innovation, and they don't have the background or training to understand a structured innovation process. They may feel that they don't have the resources like we had in Pitney Bowes. We had a 40-person innovation lab way back in the year 2002. At that time, the budget was $12 million US per year. So we could do a lot of innovation. We had the talent, we had the machinery, we had the skills, and we had the personnel. Now, the challenge for the small and medium business person is to get the mental process of going through the design thinking process, all the steps, not just doing jugaad, not just solving problems with intuition or hunches or guesses or assumptions.
You have also founded University 4.0 in 2011 and trained professors at leading Indian business schools in student-centered, task-based education, which you favor the most. That was something, a very bold idea at that point of time, back in 2011. What was broken about the way businesses were being taught, and what were you trying to fix?
Well, as I mentioned the name of Dr. Indu Shahani, one of India's great educationalists, and
Yes.
she has a saying, in India, we're stuck with a 19th century curriculum being taught by 20th century professors to 21st century students. And when I first was invited to give guest lectures and keynotes and to be a panelist at various business schools, I noticed a huge gap in the 21st century, and even for the past 25 years that we've been in this century, the world has gone ahead of us. The
Mm.
world has advanced. The needs of the economy, the needs of the companies who engage and employ our alumni, our graduates, they've changed. The recipe
Right.
for success has changed. And I don't think, by and large, our Indian education system has kept up. Now, Shri Prime Minister Modi gave us something, NEP 2020,
Right.
the National Education Plan. And the goals there are excellent. If we are able to implement this plan, I think we can reach our deserved place as #1 in the world. That's what I want to see in India. But back in 2010, when I was just being invited to a lot of these universities to give a talk, I felt I have to do something. I have to help raise the bar. So I first signed up to take a couple of classes at Stratford University in New Delhi. And then after doing more of that and proving that the way I thought education should be run actually works with Indian and foreign students here in India, then I said, I better teach this to other professors. So I started University 4.0 as sort of a side business. I was doing innovation consulting, but I said, let me go and share what I know and the way I do things with these professors. And the response was excellent. So where universities and individual instructors, professors are willing to adopt student-centered, task-based learning as opposed to teacher-centered, the phrase is chalk and talk. They write on the board, you
Right.
take down the notes, you mug up
Mhm.
and you write it on the exam. I don't approve of that. I don't think that does a good job of preparing students. I think students have to learn by doing, and they need to be much more in charge of their education. So that's why I started University 4.0, and I still do faculty workshops from time to time, FDBs.
Thank you so much for imbibing that change for the students and how business is being perceived as an education in India. You are now Chief Innovation Officer at 10x Growth, a business accelerator in Mumbai. After decades of building on practice, what drew you to this role and what does Chief Innovation Officer actually mean to you on a daily basis?
Well, I'm happy to say that I had to leave my position at Atlas Skill Tech University because I superannuated. People often cannot guess my age, but I like to joke that I'm really from the Paleozoic era. I'm
Oh,
from the dinosaur age. I'm ancient.
okay.
So my new position is custom designed for me. I'm working in a friend's company, trying to open new lines of business for this small firm. It's also part of the SMB community. And that means I have the freedom to do just about anything under this umbrella. So I have an unusually broad range of areas where I work. When I work with corporates, I usually focus on innovation, strategy, and leadership training, as well as executive coaching. When I work with small businesses or startups, it's usually more about mentoring. Even I'm
Right.
working with two very, very early stage, not even one is just barely launched, it's tiny. The other one is still preparing for the launch of their business. So I enjoy mentoring small business owners and founders. And then I continue my work with higher education institutes and even some schools. So, Chief Innovation Officer, it's just a title. The fact is, I'm sort of like a freelancer. I'm able to take a wide range of projects, and wherever I can help people to grow, either as their company, as their business, or even as an individual.
What's your message to the founders who are serving this myth like innovation is not for me? What is your core message to them?
Okay. Innovation is for everyone. Everyone, I mean, God hardwired us to be innovators. I mean, even a chimpanzee, you put a chimpanzee in a cage and you suspend a banana from the top of the cage and you put some crates or boxes there, the chimpanzee will innovate a solution to stack the boxes and climb up and get the banana. Now, I
Right.
promise you, everybody listening to this podcast is vastly more intelligent than the smartest chimpanzee. Okay, nobody here is a monkey. We're
Right.
all very intelligent, very gifted people. So every one of us is hardwired to be an innovator. The question is, are we going to innovate based on just our intuition or just our guesses and hunches and assumptions? It's not going to be successful. Ideas are cheap and plentiful. Profitable ideas, not so much. So the small business person doesn't need to have a 40 size team working full time on innovation, not required. What the small business person has to understand is when you face a challenge and you want to reach a target, a new target, and what you're doing today is not getting the job done, at least mentally, and then as much as possible, behaviorally carry out that 5-step process called design thinking. You don't have to have a team. You don't have to have a large budget. You just at least have to walk through the 5 steps yourself. So that any small business owner can master. The biggest challenge that we hear from managers at all levels in all sizes of companies is, I don't have time. That's the biggest challenge. So make the time because the future of your business depends on it. Then we get into some other common challenges. Number
Right.
one, the owner of the business, the person who started and founded the business, is far too focused on the technology. okay? And what innovation done properly does is it takes the focus off of the founder, the solution, whether that's a device, a system, a process, some software, or a service. So that's the first thing that they need to change. Even if they don't get any of the other parts of innovation, the small business person must always be focused on the customer. The customer is the source of our survival and our prosperity. And the second area that I run into, the second problem that I run into with entrepreneurs and small business owners is they don't understand their business model. They don't really understand how a company makes money. They have some assumption in the back of the mind that, hey, the old saying, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. Sorry, but in our age, that doesn't work anymore. There's so much more you need to understand about your business model. So those are the things that SMBs can work on.
Absolutely a great lesson for SMBs who are listening to this podcast. I'll channel the communication in our conversation to strategy, books, and the big ideas. You have written multiple books, including The Executive's Guide to Innovation, Practical Advice for Smart Business Leaders, and also 4 books on business process automation. You have been writing about business strategy for decades. What's the idea you keep coming back to that still isn't getting enough attention in boardrooms?
Wow, it's hard to think about only one. As you know by now, I'm interested in a lot of different areas and fields,
Yes,
and I love to help companies in a lot of different ways. So I think it would be hard for me to come up with a single big idea. But if I had to pick one, I think I'll have to repeat what I just said. It's customer centricity. Let me just relate to you a conversation I had just on as I was traveling in a taxi in Bengaluru very recently, getting ready to fly back to Mumbai. And there was a Diliwala lady, a venture capitalist, who I met at the conference, and we shared the taxi. So during our long, you know how traffic is in Bangalore, during our
right,
long ride to the airport, I asked her, or she asked me, and I asked her, what are the biggest challenges that face India in our growth story? And I think number one was that I mentioned was we're not export focused. Now, I think that's a symptom, not a cause. I compared India and South Korea. South Korea has become tremendously prosperous by focusing on exports. We in India have not. Now, we've created a massive, amazing success story in our BPO industry. We bring in over $200 billion a year in
right,
revenue in sales to India, serving overseas clients. This is an amazing success story. India has a lot to be proud of, but we haven't become as prosperous as even a small country on a per capita basis, as prosperous as a
right,
South Korea, because we love India, and that's good. We are proud of India. You've seen a lot of that under the current government. We're renaming our places and our roads Desi names instead of foreign names. We're
right,
being
right,
much more sensitive to foreign influence. Okay, this
right,
is lovely. Let's rebuild our pride after years of Mughal domination and oppression under the Raj. I'm all for that. What we're missing is we haven't figured out how to design for foreigners. We
right.
design for ourselves. We design
Perfect.
for Indians. And so it's the same, it's a manifestation of the same issue where we could grow. Right now, we know our own issues. We know how to design for ourselves. Sometimes we know how to design for our neighbors. But as I said, sometimes our founders don't think about the customer. They think more about their technology and their solution, and they risk not gaining a market. But India will grow. We don't have to be the fourth largest or the third largest economy. We have enough human capital in this country to produce more than anyone else. India has the capacity we have the capacity to serve the entire world. What we need to get there is more empathy, more ability to understand the customers in other places who don't think like Indians, don't behave like Indians, don't feel the way that Indians do. We don't have to adopt their thoughts and feelings, but we have to design products and services that match what they think, what they feel, and what they do.
Right. 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 Okay, great. You've taught at IIT Delhi Entrepreneurship Summit, spoken at first ever TEDx, which held in Jaipur, and addressed boards and academic institutions across India. Is there one insight that consistently lands differently with Indian audience that it would have with Western one?
That's a tough question. That's a tough question because, as I've said a couple of times already, the way of thinking, feeling, and doing in India is different from the way many Western countries think, feel, and do. And so, if you try to present a Western point of view, and I made this mistake many times. I made this mistake many times. You're liable to get a lot of pushback and resistance.
Right,
Um,
right,
we are we are perfectly happy and proud of our own ways of doing things. We don't
right,
have any tolerance for anything that even smacks remotely of criticism. And I ran into this. I said, but I'm just telling you what I've observed. I'm not trying to put anybody down. They said, no, you
right,
can't
right,
say that. That's
right,
insulting and offensive. So I had to learn not to say those things.
right,
So no, I can't point to any one thing that goes down well. There's one thing that I want to say, and again, the risk is that people will take this the wrong way, and I hope they won't. But to continue that conversation I was having in the taxi about the reasons that India maybe hasn't gotten as rich as other countries have,
right,
um,
right,
on that list, we covered about five different things. One of them, and it's really sensitive, but I think if we're honest, and it's no secret, is that the level of, shall we say, corruption? Can we use that word? That
yeah,
happens in India, or can we say dishonesty or self-dealing that
right,
happens in India is higher, according to global rankings. That level's
right,
higher in India than it is in some other countries. And again, I'm not meaning to criticize or anything. And in fact, I wrote to Naveen Jindal once. I met him at a conference, and he
okay,
talked about clean government. And
right,
we all
right,
know that the current government is very strong on their position. Their manifesto is we need to reduce corruption.
right,
And in that meeting, I was a little bit blunt after he gave his talk. I was the first one to ask. I said, "Sir, you've been in Parliament. What have you done to reduce corruption?" He was like, he was very taken aback. So after
right,
that, I said, I can't just throw him in front of everybody. And I said, so I actually wrote a long email, and I never
right,
got an answer back. And I said, look, if corruption is a fact of life, why don't we institutionalize it? If the
right,
Babus are not earning enough money, why don't we give them a price list? You can go to
right,
the OPD of government services, and for 10 rupees, you can get slow service, like in an
right,
OPD,
absolutely,
or you can
right,
give 1,500 to the specialist and get a treatment. I said, look, we have, this is just a reality. Some of the corruption that's here is a logical response. It's
right,
not
right,
morally evil. It's not motivated by any wickedness. It's just this is the system we have. And sometimes it's better, instead of paying a subscription fee, you pay a user fee when you need the service. These kinds of self-dealings, dishonesties, and whatever, they create friction in the economy. They
right,
create inefficiency in the economy. And so if we want to grow the biggest, fastest growing economies, the economies that tend to get the richest, are the ones
right,
that solve that.
right,
And they operate transparently and efficiently and honestly. So that would be an idea that's tough because we know the reality. We my students, I used to ask them ethics questions, and I can't say I was shocked, but they all, half of them would write, yes, I would pay a bribe. So it's just a reality of life here. But in my heart, I know that we could grow faster if we could somehow solve that.
In most of your summits and when you are orating as a speaker, you have said your key question to entrepreneurs is always who pays whom to do what. That's a simple
Yes.
framework in words. So, can you walk us through why that question cuts through so much noise?
Yes, and you may recall that is exactly what I mentioned earlier when I said in these words, too many founders do not understand their business model. You can call it a business model or you can call it a revenue model, but
Right,
at the base at the base of every single business is a system for making money. That's what we call the business model. And
right,
somewhere in there, somebody with money has to pay somebody, and the person who gets paid has to do something. Unless and until you're able to describe what it is you are doing for the money, you don't really understand your business. This happened to me literally 2 days ago, again.
right,
And I could tell you multiple stories where an entrepreneur, and it's a tragedy. This gentleman told me he has spent 7 crore of rupees trying to launch his business. He said he had some revenue at one point, and he said he
right,
had endorsements from global leaders. I can't name
right.
them, but names you would be shocked at. And yet
Okay.
his business never succeeded. So I asked him to explain to me his business, and he could not do it.
Right, right.
Can you imagine? He could not put the nature of his business in simple terms. He
Okay.
called his business collaboration. And I
Okay.
think what it is some sort of a platform or some sort of a software package that reads data in different sources and organizes it and makes it accessible. That's the best I could figure out after
Mhm.
listening to the man talk for more than 15 minutes and after going through like a 15-slide PowerPoint presentation. All he
Right,
could say about his business is it's collaboration. So I never asked him the question, but that's the
right,
question. What in the heck do you mean? Who
right,
pays whom to do what?
right.
Okay, at least if I'm right, okay, the companies pay our company to give them to give them organized access to unstructured data. It might be something that simple. He couldn't
Right,
tell
right.
me. So
Okay.
that's why the question is there. If the entrepreneur, if the founder talks about, let me just share another really sad one from about the year, 2006 or something when I first came to India. This guy said, I said, what business are you in? He says, I'm in the internet business.
Right.
Okay, he was in the internet business. Do you know what he was doing? He was selling things online. He was
Okay.
doing e-commerce. But to him, it
Okay.
was much more prestigious to talk about, I'm in the internet business. He wasn't in the internet business. He was a vendor. He was an
Okay.
online store.
Right, right.
But in his language, he was in the internet business because that had more
Mhm.
prestige. He couldn't say,
Right,
I'm peddling junk on the internet. He wouldn't say that.
right,
So
right, right.
so unless and until, and every listener to this podcast, every viewer should say, just a minute, what is it I'm actually doing to get the customer's money? And who
Right,
is that customer? Is that customer the parent of a high school student who needs trainers? Is that customer the purchasing agent at a large corporation? Who is that customer? And who actually writes the check? And
right,
what do I get paid to do? What need am I filling? What service am I actually providing? Unless and until an entrepreneur can describe that in clear, simple terms, she doesn't really understand her business.
right. Right. Okay. That's a lot, and thank you so much for bringing this global innovation perspective to Indian businesses.
Oh, it's my
Your
great
combination,
pleasure. I wish every viewer and listener great success. Jai Hind. Let's build and raise the standards of living here in India.